Good morning, my brothers and sisters at Union Congregational. It's always an honor to have the opportunity to be with you and to see and feel your faces. And it touches my heart so much, Reverend Shaw, when you use that phrase, people of God. As we come together today, I share with you one Marine's experience. 52 years ago, I fought in a war that both shattered and shaped my journey of faith and my commitment to service today. Um, a really powerful and interesting reality is that as a small child, I wanted to be in the military. I give honor to Staff Sergeant Robert G. Johnson, who served 35 years in the United States Army, and he and his beautiful wife, Pearl Johnson, rescued me from the throes of the foster care system in the state of New Jersey and brought me into their home. And he was an amazing human being, a power to be reckoned with, and I attribute most of who I am as a man today, and the principles and concepts and stick-to-itiveness to him. He was a beautifully powerful guy who was really quiet. And I remember when I first came into the Johnson home, one of the first things that I had the opportunity to do was look at some pictures, like a photo album, and there was all these pictures of my dad standing tall in this beautiful uniform. I mean, he looked like he was 9 feet tall. And, so the military was really always a really important part of my life growing up. It, 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 I was one of those kids who I got in trouble a lot. And so in the summertime, when I wasn't in school, I had to go to Fort Dix with my dad. My dad had retired and he worked in troop movement. And so my dad would take me with him to Fort Dix, and I went to Fort Dix, and I'd climb on top of all of the bags, and I just hung out and I watched every day soldiers in troop movement and maneuvers, and the military was a really important part of me. The other really important part of me was just song. It was like music. It was like communication. It's how I communicated. So, when I heard off in the distance the drill instructors hit up, pips, hip, hut up, hip, I mean, it just like really kind of resonated inside of me, and I would imitate that. I mean, my journey in life was communicating through my voice and communicating through song. See, in those early developmental years of my life, the first 5.5 years of my life, I was a ward of the state. So, like song and sound was really important to me. As a matter of fact, when I first started to learn how to speak, it was way more comfortable for me to just sing what I was thinking in my head. It felt better for me to put it in a melody than to just sing straight. So it was like music, sound, song, because I could feel it inside of me. It was how I communicated. I remember nights when I was really young where I would just kind of sit and all I do is kind of have an internal conversation with myself, and I could feel the beauty of the sound, and I could feel my breath, and everything felt so right because I hadn't experienced those years of being held. In those early developmental years, this was really important for me, rocking, motion, because the body has a need for sound and it has a need for motion. And so I came into the Johnson house and I had lots of unanswered questions. But I had this model. I had Robert Johnson to kind of be my model. So I grew up, and one of the things that I always really wanted to do is I wanted to be in the military, but I didn't really want to be in the army. And my dad was in the army. I spent a lot of time around the army, so I didn't really want to be. I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. I really wanted to be a Marine. First of all, I'll just be honest. I thought the uniform was incredible. It was like a thing. When you saw posters for the Marines, it was just something I wanted to wear that stripe. I just wanted to do that. As I went into high school, I was a really good wrestler. I was a captain of the wrestling team at Ewing High School, and wrestling was an important part of my journey. And And I really wanted to wrestle, and I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. I really wanted to do that. So, and this is a really kind of a long story. I won't go into it, but I had the opportunity to go and train at Annapolis, Maryland, at the Naval Academy in preparation for the possibility of being a candidate to the Naval Academy. That didn't happen, but it quickened my desire and my connection to like the Navy and the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps is the fighting wing of the Department of the Navy. Anyway, I really wanted that. Um, I remember sitting in the living room of my house and watching television and seeing um, a Buddhist monk set himself on fire in Southeast Asia rather than to be denied the right to worship. And that really touched me. It angered me. It hurt me to see this man, this holy man, set himself aflame. And I just didn't feel that it was right that people should be denied their right to worship. See, because another part of my reality was God. The first song I ever sang publicly was, He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. So picture, if you will, this little boy um, didn't know who his mama was, didn't know who his daddy was, went through strife and struggle early on in his life, came into the home of this family where it was a really, really strong principle and ideal to love God and to be a warrior, to be a soldier, to serve, to be one of service. Um, this all was a part of my being. It was something that I wanted to be and do. It was something that was important to me, and I grew up at a time where it was really important to be tough. Because if you weren't tough, you'd become someone's victim. So that was another. So fighting was a big thing for me, being able to fight. I remember one time, and I mean, in those days, people did, what they thought was the right thing. There was a guy named Raymond in our neighborhood who was a lot bigger than me. And I got into a fight with Raymond, and I ran home, and Raymond chased me home. And when I went to go in the door, my father held the door, and he wouldn't let me in. He said, "Fight." And I got my butt whooped that day, but I swore that I know fighting is really important. So you see, fighting and struggle was a really, really important part of my being. And being a warrior was a really, really important part of my being. And being a person of God was a really, really important thing in my life, because those were the foundations upon which I kind of built my understanding. And so I wasn't drafted, I volunteered. I joined the Marine Corps because I wanted to go fight for what the right things were. But shortly after being there, I realized that the elements of death and destruction and corruption and a lot of the challenges that I faced at home were going on right there in country. And so, one of the most important things for me in order to be able to survive was my ability to be able to sing, to articulate, but I couldn't. I lost it. I lost a sense of even an understanding of what's going on, what's happening. And I filled that with a feeling of guilt. Came back home and couldn't wear my uniform because in the streets, people were against what was going on. The same racial discrimination challenges that I faced at home, that I went off to war not thinking that I would, I faced again there. And so a part of me, the most important part of my being, shut down. And I didn't know how to communicate. And I found it hard to communicate with God because I wasn't sure how to get past this feeling of having done something wrong, but knowing that I did it for all the right reasons. Went through a long period of time where I faced that challenge. But deep inside of me, there was still this strength and this knowingness, because once a Marine, always a Marine. Came home, got out of the service, had a real difficult time, didn't know what to do, how to do, didn't really know how to communicate. It was challenging for me to understand how to do that. Had a whole lot of feeling inside of me that I really didn't understand. But one of the things that I had really enjoyed doing, while I was in the service was I love to be in the wilderness. I love to be out in the wilderness. So back in New Jersey, a good buddy of mine, his name was Ron Floyd Ademola Ikulona. He was actually a reporter at the New Jersey local New Jersey station, and he and I became really good friends because he loved to camp too. And so on this one particular day, he said to me, he said, "Fred, look, after I get off work, let's go for the weekend. We're going to go up in the hills. We're going to camp up in the hills." And I was like, "All right, man, that sounds good." Well, it turned out that there had been something that went on during that day that made him late. So we got out of town late driving in his little car. And when we got up to the campsite, it was after dark. And so we were going up these hills up to the campsite and we got stuck in the dirt. And we got out and we were pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And we just couldn't get out of that spot. We just couldn't get out of there. And he said, "Look, man, I don't know what else to do, man. Can we just pray?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's pray." He said, "But can we pray like I pray?" And I said, "Yeah, man, yeah." But I had been a little removed from prayer. But I said, "Absolutely, let's do it." And he said, "Look, just stand here next to me." And I stood there next to him and I put my head down. I closed my eyes and I heard, "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah." And something went off inside of me. Something fired inside of me. Something fired inside of me that I hadn't felt for a really, really long time. And there was like a feeling within me that said, God is speaking. I was so powerfully moved in that moment until I wept. I was so powerfully moved in that moment because I realized that a lot of what had shut me down was the realization that I felt in my heart and in my mind and in the reality of my life that I had participated in the hurting of others, that I had participated in the division and dividing of others at a time that, well, I won't politicize, but I just knew that there was a lot wrong with that. But all of a sudden, through the call to prayer, I was again aligned with my connection to God. And then I began to ask the question, God, what can I do now? God, how can I be now? When you've participated in the taking of life, and we all know that there are times and have been times, as Reverend Shaw so spoke of all of the wars and all of the conflicts. But I've come to realize, and I had come to realize over the years, that all of those things that we permitted, division, you know, um, politics, all of the things that got in the way of our ability to really be able to move forward together just continues to heap itself on top of each other. During the civil rights movement in 1968, when Dr. King was assassinated, those 3 years prior to that, I was really, really, really involved in conversations and in efforts during the civil rights movement. And I realized and understood that much of Dr. King's guidance was through the wisdom of Mohandas Gandhi and the whole effort towards nonviolent efforts towards bringing rights to people. A small brown Hindu man. And I read once a passage from Mahatma Gandhi that said, "He who does not see God in the eyes of everyone he meets need look no further." I was young. I was 16 years old when I read that. So those shapings of the experiences that I had of battling with discrimination, those shapings that I had of my understanding of the importance of being a diligent warrior and being a good warrior, those challenges that I faced when I realized that my understanding, my morality, my moral compass had been shifted because of that which I was called to do. So what can we do now? What can I do now? What can I do now was my question always. And I found that my journey took me through having the opportunity to be awakened to Christianity as a very young child, having the opportunity to be introduced to Islam. And an interesting thing about the Islamic faith is that Muslims are called to read three books: the Old Testament, or the Torah, the Injil, the New Testament, and the Quran. So that I found that the flavoring and the coming together of that which I had learned afforded me the opportunity to engage on a much broader level with all of humanity, and to recognize that in our journey to know and to understand, to be the people of God, that I could be of service. See, because once you make the pledge to protect, to serve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, that doesn't go away, even if you've been victimized by parts of it. So I may be kind of all over the place with this, but the reality of the thing is that my early realities and my early learnings and the early shapings of young people who then are called to go off to war kind of shapes our perspective upon how we live in the world. And what each of us can do to serve is to recognize that what needs to be eliminated is the need or the desire for war. We all know that there are times in our lives when it's important for us to stand up for that which is righteous. This is the importance of this psalm, right? I waited patiently for the Lord during that period of time when I didn't really know what to do. He turned to me and he heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slime pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. That firm place to stand was in search of that which I must do and be to be a child of God, to be a righteous child of God. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God by all names known. When I step into the church there at Union Congregation, or if I step into a mosque, or if I step into a synagogue, which I've been blessed to do, when I open my mouth is to be a warrior for the word and righteousness of God. For all of God's children, he's got the whole world in his hands. That's what that little boy learned, and that's what that little boy believed. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands, you and me, sister, in his hands. Many will see and fear and put their trust in God. I do not seal my lips today. I sing in any way that I can. I articulate in any way that I can, because my heart tells me to give back, to share, to remember, to be a voice in that remembrance, to continue to serve, to continue to protect, but continue to be on a journey of righteousness. I do not hide your righteousness in my heart. I speak of your faithfulness and salvation. I do not conceal your love and your truth from the great assembly. Why? Because, O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may know each other, not that ye may despair each other. When I came home, I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure how to be. There was so much going on. There was so much happening in the world and inside of my head. But I knew I had to find a way through it. I knew I had to find an answer to what must I be and do now. And what I must be and do now is one who continues to serve, one who recognizes and speaks and reminds us that all of God's children, all of the children of creation, are a part of one family, that all human life is important, that truth and honesty is important, that the capacity to know and desire to know and understand each other's stories are important, to work towards building a reality so that there need not be a need for war, to not listen to lie, but to be committed to building truth and imagination and desire in the hearts and minds of our children, so that we can live in a kingdom where all of God's children are honored, recognized, and move towards working together to create a world that recognizes and honors and loves all. Keep in your hearts and minds those veterans of these wars. Keep in your hearts and minds the families of those who have lost loved ones. Keep in your hearts and your minds and in your speaking conversations that remind people to look to God, to know that faith is the way. To the degree that we can come together, brothers and sisters of all pathways, of all teachings, to recognize and acknowledge our journey together, that together we can manifest change, and to recognize that in the hearts and minds of young men and women who make the ultimate commitment to serve, that the realities that we have in our lives every day goes with us. We have a tremendous opportunity to remember and to serve in that way. I'm so thankful for Union Congregation and your commitment to be committed to hearing, listening, supporting, loving, honoring, and inviting many voices together, because therein lies the change. When we can manifest the day where peace is a reality and not just an aspiration, recognizing that the greatest way that we can honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice is to commit our lives to being and doing that which will enable our world to create an opportunity so that no one has to go to war and die because of opposition. Blessings to you all. Thank you so much.